Hi Ninthers, welcome again to our geography class. One thing we have brought, something has brought to our notice is that many of you are not taking this online teaching in the form of YouTube seriously. But dear children, the teaching is going on. So you have to take it seriously if you really want to continue your studies in Standard 9 this year. So time is passing, teaching is going on, but many of you are not taking it seriously. But it's a suggestion and it's an advice from our side that take your studies seriously. In spite of your not having books and other things, the way we are giving you the geography class, it is very clear that if you go through the video, you are getting almost everything. 99% of the text is on the video. So with this introduction, let us start today. We are already in the 4.0 lockdown phase. That means life is not the same like every year. We have to study in spite of this lockdown. And it is good for you that you are getting enough time in your convenient time, that in this YouTube you can open any time of the day and you can always correspond all those questions during this time. So let's proceed with this new chapter today. We are concentrating on another new chapter, chapter 6, Landforms of the Earth. Today mainly we'll be talking about mountains. In the landforms of the earth there are many features. There are mountains, there are plateaus, there are plains, valleys, forests, etc, etc, etc. But mainly today we'll be discussing the little bit introduction of the landforms of the earth and mountains. In this context, we learn today a new geographical term called geomorphology. What is geomorphology? It is the systematic study of Earth's relief features. Our Earth is never at rest. That means there are some movements or forces which are constantly active in changing the face of the Earth, due to which mountains, plateaus, plains are getting formed. So we said there are many forces. Now these forces are termed in two concrete geographical terms. One is called the internal or endogenic forces, and the other one is called the external or exogenic forces. Now, what is internal or endogenic forces? This is the internal forces that originate deep inside the Earth's interior. There are, the Earth's, the surface, below the Earth's surface is made up with many plates. So due to various reasons, those plates move. Either they collide with each other, or one goes on the top of the other, or one goes away from the other. So these kind of forces which takes place inside the surface, okay, that's known as the internal or endogenic force. Just the opposite, the external or exogenic forces. What are these? These external forces are the agents of gradation, like river and wind. Now the word gradation, gradation means it is the process in which a land surface either get raised or get leveled or go down. So if it is growing, the raising, then it is called aggradation. And if it is going down, getting depression, is called degradation. So aggradation, degradation in common is called gradations. So external forces are the agents of gradation like river and wind. What is the external forces or exogenic forces work? The external forces are trying to level down the elevated surface of the earth. That means they are always eroding or making the height is lesser and lesser. On the other hand, the internal or the action of the internal forces are continuously trying to raise the surface of the earth by horizontal or vertical movements. Now, the action and reaction of these two forces that's constantly taking give birth to different landforms. Once again, I remind you the different types of landforms are mountains, plateaus, valleys, plains, etc. So today's main topic to discuss one of the landforms, very important landforms of the earth, the mountains. Now, what is a mountain? Actually, you cannot really define a mountain in words. No matter how much you define, still is something missing. However, this is an overall approximate description about the mountains. Okay, a mountain. The mountain is a kind of landform that raises prominently above its surroundings, generally exhibiting steep slopes or relatively confined summit area. Mountains generally are understood to be larger than hills. Pahar, Parbat, they're not the same. So hills and mountains, they look like, they sound similar. However, geographically they are not same. Mountains are much higher than hills. The altitude may be greater than 900 meter. Altitude means the height. It should be 900 meter and above the sea level, of course. And the slope is making an angle of 25 degree to 35 degree with the horizontal plane. In short, mountains normally have broad base, rugged surface. Rugged surface means not at all smooth, and steep slopes and narrow elevated or pointed peaks. You take a concrete example of a mountain. In short, we said it should be normally have broad base. Can you see the broad base? The base is very broad, wide, and then rugged surface. Surface is not at all smooth. So many pointed peaks are there. And steep slopes. These slopes are very steep. You can't think of climbing them in walking or running is out of question. This is very steep. And of course, narrow, elevated, pointed peaks. It should come to our mind these huge, so large mountains, when were they built, rather when were they formed? Now obviously, my dear children, they have been built or formed some million years ago. It took long time, and by the way, everything formed naturally. Now there are many mountain building periods. There are three most recent mountain building periods are that we discuss particularly in this part of geography. It doesn't mean there are only three periods. There are many periods are there. But these the three most important periods, recent ones, that you will be taking into our discussion. First of all is called Caledonian. Caledonian, about 320 million years ago that took place. Hercynian or Hercynian, it is about 240 million years ago. and the most recently alpine about 30 to 50 million years ago. Our Himalaya are many fold, young fold, Himalayas, Andes, Rockies, okay, uh, they are very much part of this alpine, that is of 30 to 50 million years ago. Now there are many kinds of mountains. There are three major types of mountains on the basis of their origin or mode of formation. These three kinds of mountains we will be discussing seriously in detail, elaborately in this chapter, one after another in the next session also. Those three types of mountains are fold mountains, block mountains, and residual mountains. Today we'll be discussing again in detail, elaborately about the fold mountains. Now, what are called fold mountains? These mountains are formed by the horizontal compression which takes place inside the earth called tectonic force. We said that the earth is never at rest. Constantly some kind of forces taking place inside the earth, which is mainly called the internal or exogenic force, endogenic force. In simple words, fold mountains are mountains formed from the folding of the earth's crust when two huge plates they collided with each other. Then the in between soft rocks or sediments that were bound to fold upward, and that is how the fold mountains are created. For your information, Himalayas, Andes, Rockies, the Alps of Europe, all these mountains are the examples of fold mountains. Now there is a story or history or geographical history. How did Himalaya come to exist? How did Himalaya came to exist, or how was it formed? This story you should know. Of course, geographical story. The Himalayas were formed in the Alpine period, as we said, 30 to 50 million years ago, in the place, surprisingly, where there was a narrow sea. Yes, you are hearing correctly, sea, Samundar. There was a sea called Tethys. Today, where you found Himalayas, 50 million years ago, there was a sea. And the name was Tethys. Now this sea, Tethys, was located between two huge plates. One is called the Angara land, that is the Indian part, and the other one is called the Gondwana land, the Eurasian plant, Europe and Asia together. Imagine the entire Europe and Asia, the entire India. These were two plates. Then what happened? Now, during the gradation, that means the uh, internal forces, okay, during the internal forces that time, due to the gradation of these two land masses by agents of gradation, resulted in the deposition of huge sediments into the Tethys Sea. Sediments dropped, deposited in the Tethys Sea. So Tethys Sea became covered. Now when these two huge continental plates, the Indian plates and the Eurasian plates, that means Angara land and Gondwana land, they collided with each other. The Indian plate was forced to go under the Eurasian plate, and the sediments of Tethys Sea, which was very soft bed, this whole seabed folded upward to form the chains of mountains called the Great Himalayas. Dear children, learn this, the history, how did Himalaya come to exist. Fold mountains are of two kinds or types. One is called the young fold mountains, and the other one is known as the Old Fold Mountains. Now they are absolutely distinctly different from each other. We can take the points one by one. The Yangfold Mountains, they have been formed during the Alpine period. They have been formed during the Alpine period. That means around 50 million years ago. On the other hand, the Old Fold Mountain, they have been formed during the Caledonian period, which is about 320 million years ago. Yangfold Mountains have steep slope. Can you see the picture here? Very steep slope. Very steep slope. On the other hand, the Old Fold Mountains have got gentle slopes. Gentle slopes. You can see they're very gentle. See, on the top they're almost elevated. Okay, they're almost like plain. Whereas the other side they've got steep slopes. Yangfold Mountains have the pointed snow-covered peaks. Can you see in the picture? Snow-covered peaks. They're too high, and that's why snow takes place, snow falls. On the other hand, in the Old Fold Mountains, they have got rounded tops, sometimes called like dome shape. Here it is not exactly. This is actually the picture of Aravalli, which is an example of Old Fold Mountains. It is actually dome shape. Have you seen the called mosque? The top of the mosque has got a dome shape. The Yangfold Mountains, they have volcanic activities are quite common here. Quite common. And these Yangfold Mountains are much higher. They are higher than the Old Fold Mountains. Whereas the Old Fold Mountains are lower than the Yangfold Mountains. One thing you should know why. Because Yangfold Mountains are still now growing. For your information, our Himalaya is growing 1 centimeter per 10 years. 1 centimeter height is growing of Himalaya per 10 years. Whereas on the other hand, Old Fold Mountains are most of them getting eroded. In fact, their formation has been stopped. Now they are in their old age. Yangfold Mountains have extremely rough topography. Can you see that? The top is very rough. It's not smooth at all. There are so many pointed peaks. On the other hand, Old Fold Mountains are highly eroded by agents of gradation. That's why their top is not having so rough. This is almost smooth. In other picture you will find on the above the Aravalli hills, okay, there are some walls or roads are made, whereas you cannot imagine in this place of Himalaya to make roads. Anyhow, the Yangfold Mountains, they have parallel ranges. Means so many mountains are together, ranges parallel. These ranges are known as cordilleras. They are still growing in height. Some of the special examples of Yangfold Mountains are our Himalayas, Andes of South America, Rockies of North America, the Alps of Europe, etc. And you have the examples of Old Fold Mountains are Aravalli of India, Aral Mountains, it is the border between Europe and Asia, Aral Mountains, and the Appalachians Mountains ranges of North America. With this, dear children, we come to the end of today's discussion of mountains, okay, and the special The chapter is called the landforms of the earth. And once again I remind you, children, take these lessons seriously. If you have decided that you will study in standard 9, then not only geography but all the classes, all the videos, you must take it seriously, because still now we are not sure when we are coming back to school. It may happen that we may have to continue for longer period, but the show must go on, classes are going on, teaching are taking place, so you must also be uh, at it. So study, stay well, and keep in touch with your studies. All the best for the 4.0 lockdown phase.